What is up, guys? It's your boy, North Sea Hero. Today, I'm doing another Ricochet video. While I do this video, I'm of course sitting in my car smoking as always. I'm also chugging water to get today because it is currently above 60 degrees outside. And because of that, my diet and physiology are going to take a minute to adjust to the warmer temperatures, but this means that I am swiggity sweating like crazy. The fact that I ate spicy food for brunch today doesn't help. But in any case, that aside, let's get into the video. And by video, I mean I see what Paul was doing there. Haha, Latin nerds unite, fist bump. Anyway. So I just watched Paul's Ricochet video. He recorded it last night at something like to the tune of like 9:15 p.m. He uploaded it either in the middle of the night last night or this morning. Either way, I believe I was asleep when it went up. I just got done watching the whole thing. And there was a lot of stuff to which I could respond. A lot of stuff Paul talked about. And if you're not familiar with the concept of Ricochet or with Paul, this is part of a series, a back and forth series I'm doing with my good buddy Paul, aka Insane Asylum Cherry Paul, here on YouTube. And basically the way it works is one of us makes a video. In this case, Paul kicked this off, what you could call season 1 or round 1. I don't know if it's actually going to be rounds, but I assume at some point we might want to do that. I've been talking to him about it. We'll see. In any case, there was a lot of stuff he could have talked about. Wait, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going in circles. So basically, it started off with him talking about a story called The Bruce-Mobile. I will link to the playlist and to his most recent video, which this one is responding to, in the description down below of this video. But, long story short, it's a back and forth video thing that he and I are doing. So, in his most recent video, he talked about a lot of different things, a lot of topics to which I could respond. Some of them light, some of them heavy, and this is one of those situations where I'm pretty much going to have to ask you to just trust me, because the fact that I'm picking what is sort of like a lighter, more apolitical, more like just overall lighter topic may sound like it's because of what I said in my most recent video, which is 2 videos ago overall in the series from this one. However, it pretty much is because it just happens to be the topic that piqued my interest. I know it's one of those situations where it's like, oh yeah, no, dude, I totally didn't pick this person because they're related to me. It's because of their skill. Like, it's one of those things where no matter how you slice it, you just can't win, because you have no way of proving your own internal thoughts. So you have no way of proving that people's idea that you're doing things for a certain motivation isn't true. In any case, the topic to which I'm going to be responding in Paul's most recent video is going to be about 2 things: mathematics and Magic the Gathering. This is a BCW 100 count storage box in which I have my double-sleeved Mono Blue Tron deck, which is my main modern deck. It's the one that I take to modern Magic games when I get the freaking chance to play them. But, it's my favorite. This is one of 2 decks from which I absolutely will not sell cards, no matter what. That and my main commander deck, the Locust God. Which I did get a chance to play the Locust God the other night with my friend Kevin at his house. We played a group of commander games. I won both of them, not trying to brag, it just kind of happened that way. The Locust God deck, to talk about that one for a moment, started off with me opening a card called the Locust God in a pack of Hour of Devastation. Now, the Locust God is a very interesting card, because to show you guys what this card does is actually quite easy, because I have it right here. See if it's mirrored for you guys or not. Oh no, it unmirrors it in the actual video when it goes to upload, that's right. So as you can see, the Locust God, legendary creature, god. So basically, it means like it's a god in some pantheon. Legendary creature means you can only have one out at a time unless something is specifically allowing you to not do that. There are ways around that. Because one of the core fundamental rules of Magic the Gathering is that if a card states something that is contrary to the game's rules, the card wins. Individual cards have the power to modify the game itself. One of the lightest and most common examples of this is that the game says you draw one card at the beginning of your turn during your draw step. Untap, upkeep, draw. Yu-Gi-Oh players, that may sound like a bit out of order, but that's just how it goes in Magic the Gathering. If you're familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh, if you play Yu-Gi-Oh, normally it's you have your standby, or you have your draw phase, then you have your standby phase, then you move on to your main phase. In Magic, you untap, which is like unrest everything. It's called resting in some games. Basically means you reset everything on your board, on your side of the field, and you get everything ready to go again for the turn. Some cards will say you don't untap this normally at the beginning of your untap step. So that's another example of a card modifying the game's own rules. Card wins. So you go untap, upkeep, which is the Magic version of standby, and then draw, and then main phase. Locust God has flying. If you play any card games with flying or some other similar kind of ability, or even if you don't, even if you don't play any card games at all, you can probably surmise what flying does. Basically, if this guy attacks, things cannot block him unless they also are flying or have some other special ability that lets them block flying creatures. Kind of makes sense. If you've got a bunch of infantry units and somebody's got, a helicopter, they can just fly right over you. Then it says, whenever you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste. You can pause the video if you want to read it. And then it has a way to draw a card and discard a card, and then when it dies, you return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step, so it keeps coming back. So I opened that bad boy in a pack. This was when I was fairly new to the game. I'd played it for a little bit, but if it says whenever you draw a card, you do some extra cool stuff, you can probably surmise one of the quickest, dirtiest, and easiest ways to build a deck around such a card, because commander decks are built around a single legendary creature, such as this one, and then you put 99 other cards in your deck, and yeah. If your commander, the card that you have with you always, I'll pretty much always have access to it, says you do extra cool stuff when you draw a card, you can probably imagine a quick and dirty, easy way to build a deck around it. You grab every card you can find that says draw a card or draw some number of cards, and you shove it right in. And that's exactly what I did. But over time, I worked on it. I built it up. The way I did it, though, is I did it the slow way, the hard way. Not to try to prove that, oh, I'm tough, I can do things the hard way, because my hard work builds character. I mean, as a general statement, that's true, but I wasn't doing it for any kind of boomer self-aggrandizing reasons. The reason was because when it comes to mathematics, I'm pretty good. I got like a 97% in my college introductory math course, but I'm not the best. And I don't like doing complicated math just for fun like Paul does, which is something he talked about. So I did it the trial and error method. But there are other ways to build Magic the Gathering decks. Because Magic the Gathering is a game where you and your opponent start off with a certain number of life points, and you try to win the game. And the way you win the game, the main way you win the game, is by reducing your opponent's life points to 0 or less. Basically, to put it simply, the game is constantly checking its own state, kind of like in a video game loop, if you're familiar with programming, how every frame it'll update the logic. Magic the Gathering basically does the same thing every time that a card's not in the middle of resolving. So to put it in a programmer's perspective, if a card's in the middle of resolving, that's kind of like an individual function being called and resolving and returning. Then you go back to the main loop and it checks the state, updates the logic. So if a player has 0 or less life, when the state is checked, they lose. That's the main way of winning the game. There are other ways to win the game. There are ways to prevent yourself from losing the game when you have 0 life, one of which is in this deck right here. But the thing about Magic the Gathering is that because it's a card game where you draw a randomized set of cards, you shuffle your deck, you draw cards, and then every turn you draw a card, you can play cards that make you draw more cards. And ideally, you want to be drawing cards that are going to bring you closer to winning the game. Only makes sense, right? So Magic the Gathering is essentially one giant game of probability. There's something called the mathematical universal hypothesis, or MUH for short, which I always find it hilarious when things have unintentionally hilarious acronyms, like the Moro-Islamic Liberation Front, or the Fair Use Tax Act, or something like that. I think it was Fair Use or Fair Unifying Tax Act, something like that. It was FUTA. And, in any case, basically states that everything can be thought of in terms of mathematics. And when it comes to games of Magic the Gathering, oh, that is very, very true. Magic the Gathering could alternatively be called Mathematics the Calculating, and that'd be a very accurate name to use for it. As I'm sure my good buddy Polymath Paul could tell you about that. But in any case, when it came to the Locust God, the way it worked is I picked out my commander, the legendary creature around which the deck resolves, because I opened him in a pack. I thought he was super cool, and I wanted to build a deck around him. So I grabbed a bunch of lands, and I grabbed every card that I could find in the right colors that say draw some number of cards, and I just shoved them in. And over time, I built up the deck by replacing cards with ones that worked better. If I found that there was I would just play a lot of games, and if I saw, hey, this card in my deck never ends up coming up, it's never relevant, it never brings me closer to winning the game, well, it's time to chuck it. But because in Commander, your deck size is exact. See, in most formats, your deck has a minimum size of 60. When you're playing limited format, like opening boosters and building decks from that, it's a minimum of 40. There's no hard number maximum. Basically, you just have to be able to shuffle it unassisted in a reasonable amount of time, according to the judges of whatever event you're at. But in Commander, oh, it's exactsies. 100 cards, including the Commander. So you have your one Commander card, 99 other cards. There are exceptions to that. Partner Commanders, we won't get into all that. But I have my one card, now I need 99 more. Well, I want about a third of those to be lands. So I'm going to be working with roughly 66 cards that are supposed to bring me closer to winning the game against all of my opponents. Because unlike formats like Modern and Limited that are generally played 1v1, Commander is a format that's meant to be played multiplayer. You get somewhere between... the ideal number is about 4 to 5. You can play with as few as 3 or even 2. If you want to do 1v1 Commander, although there is a separate rule set and ban list for 1v1 Commander, like it's considered a separate format, but there's nothing stopping you from playing regular Commander decks 1v1. But the ideal Commander game is going to be somewhere between 4 and 6 players. You can run it as low as 3 or as high as however many you want. The ideal number is generally considered to be either 4 or 5, depending on whom you ask. So as I'm playing these games, I'm thinking, well, this card just doesn't really bring me closer to winning the game. Chuck it. And as time goes on, I find that the deck has evolved into something of a hybrid between a wheels style and a combo deck. Basically, the main goal is to have the Locust God out, because he draws you a card whenever, or he creates a token whenever you draw a card. Then there's a creature that says whenever a non-human creature enters the battlefield, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. So basically, if the Locust God is out and I play this other creature, Sage of the Falls, I get to pick up an arbitrary number of cards from the top of my deck, chuck them straight into my graveyard, and just make that many tokens. The cool thing is, though, because I'm technically drawing the cards and putting them in the graveyard one by one, and I get to stop whenever I want. I get to basically search my deck for a specific card that turns all of my little dinky little insects into absolute just Godzillas of their own right. So however many I have, that's how strong they are. Normally they have 1 attack and 1 defense, but there's a card that says however many I have, that's how many attack and defense I have. So if the card I'm looking for is really deep down, I'll search through, 40 cards or 50 cards, and I'm like, okay, here it is. Throw the rest in the graveyard. I've got 50 bugs. Each of them has 50 attack, 50 defense, so they're basically like 20 Godzillas stacked together. Actually, more like 7 Godzillas put together. They actually had a Godzilla card in the game. It was a promo thing. Anyway, so think of like 7 Godzillas put together, and I have 50 of those. Each one is 7 Godzillas put together. So yeah, that wins the game. That just wins the game. If I have the Locust God out and I play this other one, it wins the game. So the backup plan is to just keep throwing away my hand and drawing that many cards again. That's what a wheel effect is. Until I just have an army of bugs that can overwhelm my opponents anyway. Usually what I'll do is I'll try to stall out and just not die and let my opponents knock each other down a peg. My opponents will be attacking each other, they'll be taking life points off each other, and then when everybody's at about 20 or less, I've got 4 opponents, each of them are at 20. Now I'm gonna make like 20 bugs, and then I can just start sniping them off one by one. It's pretty fun. But anyway, that was a deck that I built myself through trial and error. Now, the Locust God is a very popular commander. A lot of people play him, but nobody plays a deck quite like my style. Mine is basically stall with either a combo or wheel plan. So it's basically like a stall combo deck with an attrition backup plan. However, there is another deck that I have. That is the one I really wanted to talk about. This one is called Mono Blue Tron. Again, if you're not familiar with Magic, don't have to worry about what any of those mean. Mono Blue means that the only color it uses is blue. Of the 5 colors, white, blue, black, red, green, it uses blue as its only color. It does have some black color effects in here and ways of generating black mana, black resources, but it's like 99% blue, 1% black, so it's considered mono blue. But it's also Tron. Again, don't really need to worry about what that means. If you do know what it means, though, and you've never heard of Mono Blue Tron, but you know what Mono Blue is and you know what Tron is, yeah. Mono Blue Tron is exactly as a-hole-ish and trolly as it sounds. Exactly. Again, this is something to which Paul can very much attest. What I wanted to talk about here is that this is a deck that was crafted by some very smart people, mainly one very smart guy. I unfortunately cannot remember his name, or at least his online handle. I never knew his actual real name. But you can search Mono Blue Tron Deck Inventor if you want to find out who made it. The point is, unlike my Locust God deck, where every card is just meant to bring you closer to the goal in some way, shape, or form, whether they be resource boosters that let you play expensive cards faster, or cards that just draw 2 or 3 cards here and there to make bugs while also digging you closer toward the combo finisher or the wheel cards, the big boy cards. It's all just a big synergy. Every card just needs to be able to have some way of bringing you closer toward the goal of winning the game, which winning the game in Magic the Gathering usually takes the form of making all your opponents lose. There are cards that just say, if X condition is met, you win the game. Period. The normal way of winning the game is to make every opponent, which in a standard game of Magic is going to be only one person, is to make all your opponents lose, and the normal way of making an opponent lose is making them lose all their life points. Oh, and in Commander, you start off with 40 life points, not 20. Now, this deck is a well-oiled machine. If Dredge or White Weenies or regular Tron are the AK-47 of decks. This is the FN Scar of decks, okay? This thing has to be well oiled. Everything has to be perfectly in place, or the whole thing falls apart. Now, you can do a little bit of modification here, a little bit of aftermarket work there. You can trick it out to some extent, but it comes pretty much pre-tricked for the most part. And it has to be well oiled, everything has to be in working order, and you have to know exactly how to use it and take care of it, or it's going to be useless to you. But as I was saying, if you take care of it, and if it's well oiled, and if every single part that you've swapped out is perfectly in spec and still contributes to the whole thing running, is it nice. Oh, is it nice. It's all mathematics. It's all probability. And that's why every single card in this deck has to be perfectly tuned based on the probability that you're going to get to it, weighed against the probability that you're going to need it, weighed against the probability that's going to be effective in the situation for which you need it. This is spatial contortion. Target creature gets +3/-3 until end of turn. Now this card has a few very different and sneaky uses. Its main use, however, is for killing enemy creatures that have 3 toughness or less. Toughness you can think of like an individual creature's life points. The difference between Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering is that creatures heal after every turn. However, if a creature has 3 toughness, 3 creature health points or less, this card destroys them. Oh, even if they're indestructible. Because of what I mentioned earlier about state-based actions, basically, if a creature has 0 or less toughness, 0 or less creature life points, they die even if they're indestructible. See, indestructible means damage and effects that say destroy don't destroy it. However, having 0 or less toughness does. This gives a creature 3 extra attack at the cost of losing 3 toughness until the end of the turn, which if their toughness was already 3 or less, it just kills them. It kills them. So, there's another cool thing though, because if you have a creature that can survive that, like say Wormcoil Engine, which has 6 toughness, it goes from having 6 attack, 6 health to having 9 attack, 3 health. It's pretty good. Mindslaver. This is the crux of the deck. Basically, you can get this thing back from your graveyard and play it every turn, and it literally says, you control target player. During his or her next turn. Or during that player's next turn, however it words it. You control target player during that player's next turn. You control target player. Yeah, turns out being able to control your opponent, like literally you control the player, it means you make all decisions for them and can see all cards that they can see. Turns out that being able to do that on every single one of their turns for the rest of the game is a pretty good way to win. But in any case, Mindslaver, 1 copy. Chalice of the Void, 1 copy. Spatial Contortion, 1 copy. Cyclonic Rift, Treasure Mage, Snapcaster Mage, Platinum Angel, Ugin the Spirit Dragon, Walking Ballista, Torrential Gearhulk, Wormcoil Engine. These are 1 copy cards. If I have one copy of a card in a deck, the chances of me getting to that card are pretty low, right? But that's the whole point. Thirst for knowledge. Draw 2 cards, draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards, or unless you discard an artifact. So this deck's general style is, it doesn't matter what the probability of me getting to a specific card is in terms of drawing 1 card per turn over the course of a normal game, because that's not how I'm playing the game. I am playing the game by drawing way more cards than you're supposed to. So if a game normally takes 3 turns and you're going to draw 3 cards plus your initial starting hand of 7, that gives you 10 cards out of 60 in your deck. You better have good probabilities. But if you have a deck full of counter spells designed to stall out the game and make it take more turns, plus you're drawing an average of 2 to 4 cards per turn instead of 1, your probabilities of hitting that 1 silver bullet card that are going to win the game are suddenly much higher. That's basically what this deck is. Yes, the game-winning cards are silver bullets that only include 1 copy, but all the other cards in the game are designed to just make me not die while I get to those cards. This deck was created by some very smart people who understood the mathematics and probabilities very well. I have tweaked it a little bit. I've tested the tweaks. The tweaks seem to be very good. The deck does fairly well. Why am I talking so much about Magic the Gathering all of a sudden? It's all about mathematics. It's all about mathematics. However, it's also about human experience. Yes, I sat down with calculators and calculated the probabilities of drawing certain cards in this deck after a certain number of turns, given a certain number of average draws per turn. But that's not my main style of building or playing decks. I go by the human experience. The Locust God started off as an absolutely awful deck that could not win a game to save my life. But over time, I learned this card doesn't work. This card just does not help me win the game. And if a card doesn't help me win the game, it shouldn't even be in the deck in the first place. I noticed that there were cards in my deck that, even when I did draw them, even if I got them at some point every single game, I never ran into a situation in which that card actually advanced me toward my goal of winning the game. So I would cut the card. Repeated tests. Repeated tests. I would play as many games of Commander, as many games of Magic in general as I could get my hands on. I would play as many opponents as I could get my hands on, as many different opponent decks as I could get people to play with me. I would play as much as I could, and through all this testing, I would learn, this card doesn't work, cut it out, replace it with something else. Oh, this card was a really good addition because it comes up fairly often, and when it comes up, it helps me win the game. Getting this card into my hand with the ability to play it greatly advances me towards winning the game, and my ability to play it once I get it in my hand is high enough that this card is a worthy addition to the deck. Does this sound familiar to anybody out there? I've mentioned before that I do hobby programming. I'm not super great at it. There's a lot of mathematical concepts related to programming that I still can't grasp my head around. My version of programming is very similar to my version of building a Magic deck. I start doing stuff, and if it doesn't work, I cut it out and try another method. Sound familiar? Those of you who are into machine learning and AI might see a connection here. The way that I learn what works and what doesn't in a game of Magic the Gathering when building a deck like this, or when making tweaks to a well-oiled machine like this, very similar to how machine learning algorithms learn. That's the true human element to it. That's what makes it both very impressive and kind of a little bit scary, because even though they're machines, the way that they learn is very similar to this, or to this, at least the way I do it. It's all about trial, error, and feedback. Now, the feedback, when it comes to something like making a magic deck like this, is very easy. If I use a card repeatedly, and I see this card coming up over multiple games, and end up losing all those games, I learn, oh, that card doesn't work. I need to try something else. Similarly, a machine learning program that was designed to beat the first level of Super Mario Brothers learned in a very similar manner. First thing it learned was, okay, just walking forward until something happens does not beat the level. Okay, jumping randomly doesn't beat the level. Okay, jumping at this particular point makes me closer to the end of the level than not jumping there, so I'm going to always choose to jump there. Now, when you're in a deterministic environment like that, like Super Mario Brothers, where the Goomba always spawns at the same point and always walks the same speed to the left, that's one thing. It's a little bit different than something that is, according to the mathematical universal hypothesis and some other theories of the universe, technically deterministic, like Magic the Gathering, but for all intents and purposes is non-deterministic. So it may be a little bit different, because a game of Magic the Gathering in the grand scale of the universe is very deterministic. Once the cards are shuffled, anybody who knew what those cards were and what order they were in, and assumed that the player was always going to make an optimal decision toward winning the game, could tell right off the bat who is going to win. Some people have claimed that Magic is a solved game, particularly the modern format. People have said, oh, you can just draw your opening hand and then turn over the top 3 cards and declare a winner. That's the thing, though. They're the element of human error. Now, machines have human-like error, but that human-like error really is error in the manufacturing, programming, and overall creation of the machines themselves. Human error is what really makes the human experience. I can't tell you how many times I've made an awful misplay that cost me a game of Magic, when just making the right play would have won me the game handily. But seeing that, learning from it, it actually makes life better. Because winning a game of Magic is a good feeling, of course. But losing a game of Magic and then ending up in a very similar, losing a game of Magic because of a mistake and then ending up in a very similar situation later on and not making the same mistake and winning the game because I avoided that same mistake, winning the game by using something that I learned firsthand through my trial and error, that's one of the greatest feelings in the universe, at least to me. And that's why error and frustration and discomfort and sadness are so vital to confidence and happiness and the human experience as a whole. Because when you make that misplay, when you're playing Bluetron against what is it called? It's the one, Affinity. When you're playing Bluetron against Affinity, and you make such an obvious mistake, like not playing Karn the Great Creator against your opponent's tapped out board when you easily could, man, it feels like trash. It feels awful. But that makes the next game against Affinity, where you do the right thing and you win the game by playing the right way, it makes it feel thrice as good. So in the end, you come out as a net positive. Yeah, you felt like trash for a minute because of that stupid mistake, but overcoming that mistake, doing the right thing next time, and achieving victory through learning from the mistake feels thrice as good as it would have otherwise. So basically, if we quantify the emotions in terms of unit, where the loss is -1 units and a win is +1 units, the win by itself would be 1 unit of happiness, but losing and going into 1 unit of debt, but then winning as a result of learning from the mistake and gaining 3 units of happiness, you're at a +2 there versus just having 1 in the first place. So you've actually had a net profit of 1 unit of happiness. Everything can be explained, or at least termed, in mathematics. Mathematics are a part of the human experience. After all, mathematics is half discovery, half invention. Mathematics is half a human discovery, half a human invention. At least that's the way I look at it. But even when I just throw crap at the wall, see what sticks through trial and error, hey, that's a form of mathematics. People are using that exact same form of mathematics to teach computers how to drive cars for us. Yep. Well, anyway, this is North Sea Hero signing out. But before I go, remember to like the video if you like the content, dislike the video if you dislike the content. Leave a comment if you have any feedback for me. Number one thing you can do, share this video. Link back to it in some way if you want. And, because this is Ricochet, be sure to check out Insane Asylum Cherry Paul's videos, including his response to this one, which I am excited to see in the future. I hope to see all of you guys later, and I hope to see us build a sort of community with this, where we can see the same people in both our comment sections, build up a little community, build up some lore, some Ricochet lore. Get the Ricochet fan wiki going at some point one day. You know, that's kind of the dream. At least for me, having that kind of online presence is kind of the dream. Anyway, this is North Sea Hero, really, signing out.